Greetings and welcome to another video. In this one today I'm going to have a look at some early arcade ports on the Commodore 64. Now the 8-bit computers generally get a bad rap for their arcade ports because they're not always that good. But back in the early to mid 80s, if you weren't lucky enough to live near an arcade or by the sea, then pretty much your arcade experience was reduced to only being able to play on your home computer or console. So in this part I'm going to concentrate on the early years, ports of early arcade games which came to the home fairly close to when the games were out in the arcades. So let's dive in and take a look. So first up we have Spy Hunter, which came out in 1983 from Bally Midway. And in this game you drive a car vertically up the screen, very spy-esque, very James Bond, and basically you collect weapons and you've got to take out the enemy vehicles. Now what you drive is a fictitious G6155 Interceptor, and you get different cars that try to force you off the road. You got the cars that have like the blades come out the side. You have the cars that just bump you off the road, and you also have the boss cars. I think the first one is a like an elongated limo that fires bullets out the side at you, and you have to carry on vertically up the screen through changing landscapes, basically trying to take out the baddies and avoid reducing the innocents to their death. So like that one there, I should not have shot. I need to avoid the motorbikes and the other cars. Now that's a baddie there. That's the boss car there. Well, I say the boss car, it's the biggest baddie on this level. So every time you die, your truck comes in, deposits you back on the road, and then you get slung off the road like that by a spiky car. Brilliant. But it is a fun action game. It's nice and smooth. It's fairly fast for the time. Yeah, that's the car that bumps you off the road. And if we ever get to it, your truck comes past and you drive on the back a la Knight Rider, and you pick up extra weapons like missiles and oil slick smoke. Very James Bond. Oh, I am making a pig's ear of this. Pretty much leave it in low gear all the time, otherwise it goes too fast to do anything, especially without the steering wheel controls of the arcade, the arcade original cabinet. And you basically get infinite lives until the time runs out, then you get a couple of lives, and then that's it, game over. But all in all, definitely a fun game to play. So what we'll do now is we will jump across to the Commodore 64 and have a look at the version that come out on that. Because for the time, I think they done a pretty stand-up job with the C64 version. Here we go. Obviously not using the vertical monitor, it's a slightly stretched out screen. But I still think they made a good conversion of it. Obviously the graphics are going to be a bit chunkier because it's a lower resolution machine. But the same thing applies. You still get the same timer. And you get infinite lives pretty much until the timer runs out. And the one thing I didn't show in the arcade version is every so often you'll get like a slip road down into the river and your car transforms. Oh dear, that was terrible. Your car transforms into a boat, and then you've got a water level. Well, so it's the same level, but you're on the water instead. But I always thought this was a really nice game. It's got that great silky smooth Commodore 64 scrolling, and the graphics aren't too dissimilar to the arcade. I mean, you can see what they are and what they're doing. So here comes the vehicle, and that little sign on the back denotes that that's the smoke screen. So up the ramps, in the back, he'll deposit you back out again. And you'll end up with a smoke screen. Like that. And then you crash and you lose your smoke screen. Well, I find this just as much fun to play as the arcade version. If anything, this one being slightly, well, obviously designed for the use in the home of a joystick. I find the controls, although slightly twitchy, it's a little bit easier to control in the arcade version I just showed, purely because that was made for a steering wheel. So, another vehicle, another drop off. I'm pretty sure this one is the oil slick. And there's a slip road there, so what I'll do is I'll try and get across and see if I can go into the water. I was good of him to drop me back there. So yeah, that's the oil. Slowly sneak across and manage not to blow up. Brilliant. Right, we're in the water as a boat. It's pretty much basically the same thing. Enemies to shoot. You just happen to be in a boat instead. You can still be bumped into the side and explode. Wait for him and then blast him. That's me causing an environmental disaster with the oil in the water there. But yeah, I think this is a good version, considering it's an old one. That suspicious looking thing on the back of that is not arming me with dildos, that is in fact the missile. And that's for the helicopter that comes along. I'm actually making a better version of this than I did the arcade version. And you can have multiple weapons, you can basically have the lot. So now if I get on the back of here, I will have the missile, the smoke screen, the standard gun, and the oil slick as well. Well armed spy. Then because the timer's run out, I'm on lives now rather than a countdown. Definitely a fun game to play. In fact, I've forgotten how good the C64 version this is. I think when this come out, I would have still had my Spectrum. I did have the Spectrum version, and it was quite nice, but the cars were a bit bigger, and obviously the scrolling wasn't as smooth, but it was still a fairly nice version. You're not supposed to blow your own lorry up, by the way. Yeah, every time you kill a civilian, you end up with no points. Right, there's the helicopter. The missile should auto-fire at him, like that. I do like the use of the Peter Gunn music as well in this game. That'll be game over then. But definitely one worth checking out on the Commodore 64. It's not arcade perfect, it is a bit chunky. But considering how early it is, I think they've done a smashing job. Next up, we have got Moon Patrol, which was released into the arcades in 1982 by IRM and was licensed to Williams for the North American release. And this game is credited for the introduction of parallax scrolling in like side scrollers, so that's quite a feat in itself. It does create a really good effect, and that's something that the C64 really excels at. So in this game you take the role of Lunar City police officer, and you've got to look after Sector 9, and you've got to travel over the moon surface and move towards the right hand side of the screen, so it's just a left to right scroller. And you've got a number of courses all divided into 26 checkpoints, so you know there's quite a lot to do. It's quite a good little shooter, can prove to be quite difficult, especially as the game goes on and there's mines in the floor. We're into Sector B. I do like the way it's kind of got independent suspension, but there's always a neat touch in this game. I believe there was a recent Atari 8-bit version of this that was rather good as well. I do like the way the wheels will fly off and bounce about. But a classic early arcade game nonetheless. Does prove tricky. It's definitely one that is more rewarding the more you challenge yourself with it and get used to the controls. Well, I like it anyway. So let's have a look at the Commodore 64 version. So over on the 8-bit computer version, the front page isn't quite so effective as the arcade one. But having played this before, I do happen to know that it's a really good version, if not a little bit chunky. But yeah, you can see straight away it's chunky, but it's all there. You've got the same checkpoints every 6, wheels that fly off all over the place, and they have maintained the parallax scrolling, which is one of the really important things that the arcade one had. I've always thought this was a really, really good version of the arcade game, and considering, you know, how early this came out, you know, you're looking at before anyone had really learned any of the real tips and tricks on the Commodore 64 for, you know, shaded graphics and really enhanced sound and anything like that. They've just basically done the best they could at the time to port the arcade version over, and done a bloody good job. Unlike my playing. Very, very reaction-based game, especially when you've got like an alien ship above you that drops a bomb right in front of you, and you have to jump right at the last minute. Actually, jumping does help. Again, third time's a charm. Double bounce, and I get done by a bomb. But yeah, I mean, the backgrounds aren't as impressive as the arcade version, but they still do the same job. I think it's a really nice version. Probably could have done a bit more work on the title page and continue page, but you don't play the title page or the continue page, so it doesn't really matter. But all in all, a sound version of a really fun arcade game. Right, next we've got Wizard of War, which was released all the way back in 1980 from Midway. And basically it's a maze shooting game with some very dramatic music. And it was ported to quite a few systems, but the Commodore 64 system, as we'll see later, is a particularly good port. So basically your character, who's a warrior, has to kill all the monsters in the maze by shooting them, and you've got a second player. It's one of those strange games where player one actually starts on the right hand side of the screen rather than the left. And if you're playing two players, you can basically team up and try and get as far as possible. But if I'm playing a one player game, I tend to zap the computer and get the bonus points. And also I should probably apologise for the speech emulation in Mame. It's not the best. It does sound like someone's got hold of the computer's nuts while he's saying stuff. Yeah, the idea is you shoot everything, clear the maze out, and then you progress to the next level. And it is not as easy as it looks because they shoot back. that speech emulation is absolutely mental sounding. But yeah, you can choose by the amount of credits to put in to have 3 warriors or 7 warriors. I always tend to play the 3 warrior game. And there's your list of scores. This is an absolute classic, and it is a lot better than it actually looks. So the C64 version, well, you can see straight away it's nigh on identical. You know, obviously the colours are slightly more muted on the Commodore 64, but this is pretty much as close as it gets. And this one's actually come from Commodore themselves. I actually still own this on cartridge. Let's get a game underway. And you can hear they've got the music and the sound spot on. I mean, arcade perfect, no. As close as you're going to get on an 8-bit machine, definitely. Even though it's a very basic game by, you know, the games that followed, you know, in the mid-80s, this is such a good game. And still hard. You notice on the one-player game on the 64 here, you don't get the second player, so that's 3,000 extra points I'm not going to fucking get. But it's all there. The radar's there at the bottom. All the creatures are there. One thing I did notice while playing the 64 version again is that the wizard seems to appear a lot more often than he does in the arcade one. Just as difficult to bloody kill, mind you. I really like this version of this game. This is what I mean when I say that the 64 seemed more like an arcade feeling platform for me, you know, when I was a kid. Shoot that bloody thing. Slippery bastard. There you go. See, and straight away the wizards come up. That seems to happen a lot less on the arcade. Ooh, double score. A lot of arcade games definitely take their sound cues from Space Invaders. If you were a fan of the arcade game and you got the cartridge of this on the 64, you would not be disappointed. It's such a close conversion. All it's really missing is the speech from the arcade. Everything else is pretty much all there. Well, he got away. And we get an extra man. And we lose our extra man. That didn't last long. I have to say, they've, I know I didn't get that far in the arcade one we looked at, but they have got the level layout done pretty well. I played the arcade one recently, like within the last couple of months, having a go at the high score challenge that was on the Mame channel, which I have to say Lewis is doing a fantastic job of running that. These things are enough dart about the place. See, I've shot the warlock and there's the wizard again, so yeah, it definitely comes up more on this version. I'd have got him then if I went facing the wrong way. Bastard's got away. And I've got a game over. But yeah, what a fantastic version of that game that really is. That's definitely one worth trying. Almost think that was the arcade version, just perhaps a little bit more muted colour wise. Brilliant. For our next game, we have got one of the most successful American-made arcade games of the era. And I say American because this was the first of the Pac-Man series not to be made by Namco, but it was pretty much a conversion kit for Pac-Man that they had in America. And I mean, there was a lot of legal tussles with the naming of the game and that back in the day, when I was going to call it Mrs. Pac-Man, Super Pac-Man. But it was critically acclaimed, and it was basically considered by many to be better than the original Pac-Man. I don't think I'm really qualified or good enough at it to pass that kind of judgment. But it's definitely a classic game, and it's probably, for for me, the best Pac-Man clone on the 64. So, I mean, it is basically the same gameplay as Pac-Man. You know, you run round, you eat the power pills, the ghosts turn blue, you eat the ghost, their eyes run back to their lair, rinse and repeat. You do get the fruits that jump into the screen on this one rather than just appear. They kind of jump around a bit. But it is effectively the same gameplay, so there are some differences. You get 4 mazes that appear in different colour schemes, and they flip round during the game's intermission, or after the game's intermissions. You've got a pink maze, a light blue maze, a brown maze, which I'm pretty sure the Commodore will do well. Hey, David. And a dark blue maze. And there's double warp tunnels in some of them. The patterns are a bit different for the ghosts, and one of the ghosts is called Sue rather than being called Clyde. And that's your main differences, really. I mean, the game is pretty much the same thing. I mean, I don't expect to see much in the way of intermissions with me playing it. John Stoodley, I am not. But it is a fun game. You know, I'm not particularly bothered whether I play a male or female character in a game. For me, it is all about the gameplay and not what the character has or hasn't got between their legs, or in this case, what they're wearing on their head. So here we go with Miss Pac-Man on the Commodore 64. And straight away, even though it hasn't got the ghosts running about on the main title screen, you can see it's a very, very similar screen. And I think Atari Soft have done a fantastic job with this one. This is the Pac-Man game I used to play at home all the time. I don't actually remember playing any of the other ones. Yeah, as far as 8-bits go, well, that was just shit to start with. What I was going to say was, as far as 8-bit versions of Pac-Man go, or Miss Pac-Man in this case, well, I think this is superb. Movement's smooth, the controls are tight. This is another one of them games that if it goes wrong, it's because you've gone wrong, not the game stitching you up. You know, I'd need an expert in such things to tell me whether or not this follows like arcade patterns and that. It's such a good conversion. Again, I mean, they all are. I'm not going for shit conversions in this video. I love the sounds in these early games. Yay, finished the level. Then we get to do that map again. Absolutely nailed it with this game. Again, that's, as usual, more than can be said for my playing of the games. But yeah, another thoroughly superb conversion. Definitely another one worth trying if you haven't tried it already. Now this is a bona fide arcade shoot 'em up classic. Released in 1983 by Konami, this is Gyruss. Great game, superb sounds, absolute thumping sound effects. And it's got a bit of an interesting history to this game. In as much that the guy that wrote it, or the guy that designed it, Yoshiki Okamoto, he designed this, and the one he designed before was Time Pilot, and there were some issues with pay, and he was basically fired after this, and he went on to join Capcom and create another iconic shooter, 1942, and a small game you might have heard of called Street Fighter 2. So all good things, as they say. Anyway, Gyruss itself is a tube shoot 'em up. It's kind of, to me, it's always reminded me of a cross between Gallagher and Tempest. If you must know what I mean. But it's not the easiest of games. It is great fun. I mean, as I've said already, the sound effects are something else. But it's been such a long while since I've played this. I can't remember exactly where the ships come out from, because like many shoot 'em ups, it is a memory game. If you know where they're going to come from, you can pretty much be in the right place and you know, work up to get a perfectly decent score. So we'll get another one going. Yeah, so basically, you're pretty much shooting other spacecraft, and they can shoot you, or they can destroy it if they crash into you. And they pretty much stick to the middle of the screen. You can shoot while you're in there, and they basically chuck out these little bullets that come hurtling out the screen. Those yellow ones that come hurtling out the screen towards you. And you can shoot, I believe it was that orange sort of flickery sphere. You can, I think it's that you shoot to get better firepower, which is much more powerful. Well, I'll say much more, it's twice the power of the one you start with. This is a classic arcade game. I remember getting this on the Commodore 64, and for years I had a version of this that crashed when it loaded. You had to type in a SYS command. I can't remember what the number is now, but yeah, I ended up getting an original of it years later. But anyway, back to the arcade version. This was pretty much licensed out to Century in the United States, and then eventually Konami made their own conversion kit. But what an absolute classic. This is one that sounds really good on my Mame cabinet with the sound turned up loud, because I've got a sub in the bottom of my arcade cabinet. When you have it up loud and you tweak the bass up a little bit, it really thumps. And this is a recommended play loud game. So over on the C64, gratefully, very gratefully, brought to us in 1984 from the Parker brothers, we have their version of Gyruss. And it's a game I played to death back in the day. And what more can I say? It's everything an 8-bit conversion should be. You know, it's got the music, it's fairly smooth. I will admit that under emulation, the sprites do seem to flicker a bit more. I don't remember them flicking that much on my CRT. But it's all there. You've got the music, you've got the sounds. You've even got the amusing 2 jumps to Uranus that we didn't see in the arcade version. It's always worth a giggle. It's not quite as frantic as the arcade version, but you know, an arcade game is made to do one thing: make money and play one game, whereas a home computer is pretty much made to play many games, programming and that. So Don't expect them to be exactly the same. Well, I certainly didn't anyway. This is a great shoot 'em up. Possibly a little bit easier than the arcade version, but as much fun nonetheless. See, I went and said it, didn't I? Well, it's easier, and then I'd die. Yeah, I still absolutely love this game. Not when that happens though. You know, it's fairly fast, fairly smooth. It's got all the sounds in the right places. It's got pretty much all the colours in the right places. You can't go wrong with a bit of Gyruss. There we go, we've made it to Neptune now. So now we should get a little bonus level. Or they call it the chance stage. And that's just literally shoot everything. The more you shoot, the bigger a bonus you'll get. This is on the arcade as well. Does help if you can remember where they came from. Or where they come out from. I did used to know it. It's been a while. I'm sure there's going to be people in the comments telling me where I've gone wrong with all of these games, but that's fine. I don't proclaim to be the world's greatest gamer because you've only got to watch me play. I ain't going to fucking get away with that, am I? There we are, everybody. 3 warps to Uranus. That's one entendre you've got to have. Yeah, this is definitely one of the must-have shooters to own on the Commodore 64. You know, I freely admit it's not as impressive as the arcade version, but when you consider what it's running on, then it becomes impressive. And I recommend it to absolutely everyone. If you like shooters, this is one for you. So there you go. That is what I consider to be 5 really great early arcade games and 5 really, really well put together Commodore 64 ports. You know, they're not always going to look exactly the same as the arcade. You know, the different resolutions between an arcade monitor and an old CRT telly, which is what a lot of us played on back in the day. You know, there's quite a lot of difference there. So it's not going to be arcade perfect, but all the ones that I've shown in the video today are ones that play equally as well as their arcade counterparts, and that for me is the most important thing. I'm not a graphics snob. As long as the game's got good sound and most importantly plays like it should, then I'm not always that worried about the graphics and stuff like that. So, let's have a look at them all running up together. I will leave you with some more of the tune Bulldog by Ben Daglish. It's got nothing to do with the arcade games, but it's a bloody good tune and you can't go wrong with a bit of Ben. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you in the next video, and laters.